The 20th of September is coming, and three separate age pension changes land on that exact date at once. If you wait until the day itself to work out what it means for you, you are doing this the hard way. Here's the short list of what to actually check before it hits, not after. These three changes don't all pull in the same direction, which is exactly why treating the date as one single event is a mistake. A rate rise, a deeming increase, and a health card threshold shift are three genuinely different things happening to three different groups of people, sometimes to the same person all at once. Someone can gain from one part of the 20th and lose from another part of it in the same fortnight, and the only way to know which applies to you is to actually check, not assume. First, your rate. The regular indexation increase lands on the 20th, and the official figure gets confirmed by Services Australia about a month out, so it should already be public by the time you're watching this. Don't guess at what you think your new rate is. Go check the confirmed number directly, because early indicators pointed to this being a modest rise, and budgeting off an assumption instead of the real figure is exactly how people get caught short. This matters more than it sounds, because indexation increases aren't identical every round. Some rises have been larger, some smaller, depending on what inflation and wages did in the months beforehand. Carrying over last round's figure in your head and assuming this one matches it is exactly the kind of small avoidable mistake that throws out a budget by a few dollars a fortnight, which adds up over a full year of fortnights. Second, and this is the one to actually act on rather than just read about. If you're on a full pension and you've got savings or investments sitting anywhere near the asset or income thresholds, the deeming rate increase landing on the same date can push some full-rate pensioners onto a part rate, purely because the assumed income on those savings goes up, not because anything in your own life changed. Picture someone with savings sitting just under the current income test cutoff. Their balance doesn't move, they don't touch a cent of it. But once the deeming rate applied to that balance ticks up on the 20th, the assumed income Centrelink counts against them rises too. And if that tips them over the line, their payment drops without a single thing in their actual life changing. Here's the mechanism worth understanding before you run your own numbers. Centrelink splits your financial assets into two bands. For a single person, roughly the first $66,800 is deemed at the lower rate, with anything above that deemed at the higher rate. For a couple, it's roughly the first $106,200 combined at the lower rate, with the remainder at the higher rate. When both rates tick up on the 20th, it's specifically the assumed income on everything above that lower band threshold that rises the most, which is exactly why this hits people with larger savings balances harder than people with smaller ones. If that might be you, don't wait for a reduced payment to arrive as a surprise. Run your own numbers against the confirmed new deeming rates before the date so you know what's coming instead of discovering it after the fact. Third, and this is the one that's actually worth some time before the date rather than after. If you've checked your eligibility for the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card before and come up just short, the income thresholds get re-indexed on the same day, almost always upward. If your income hasn't changed since you last checked, it's worth checking again once the new figures are confirmed. The margin that excluded you last time may simply not exist anymore. The card itself only tests income, not assets, which is exactly why people who own their home outright or have a healthy super balance sometimes wrongly assume it's not for them. It's worth a genuine second look rather than relying on an old assumption. And it's worth remembering what's actually attached to it, because that's what makes rechecking worth the 10 minutes. Cheaper prescriptions under the PBS, bulk billing incentives for GPs in a lot of areas, and a range of state and territory concessions on top, all from a card that costs nothing to hold once you qualify. It's also worth glancing back at what happened the last time this exact combination of changes landed, because the 20th of September isn't the first time all three have moved together. Back in March, the same three-part pattern played out. A rate rise, a deeming increase, and a threshold adjustment, all on the same date. Anyone who checked their numbers ahead of that round wasn't caught out by the deeming change. Anyone who didn't largely found out from a smaller payment arriving with no explanation attached. The pattern repeats every 6 months. The only variable is whether you're ahead of it or behind it each time. There's a fourth thing worth doing before the date, and it's less about any single figure and more about not getting caught flat-footed. Pull up your last Centrelink statement now, while you've got a spare 10 minutes, and note down your current fortnightly rate, your assessed income, and your assessed assets as they stand today. It sounds unnecessary until the 20th arrives and your payment changes. At that point, having last week's numbers to compare against is the difference between knowing exactly what shifted and why, versus just seeing a different number land in your account with no way to work out which of the three changes actually caused it. One of them wrote down their pre-change numbers and can see immediately it was the deeming rate, not an error, not a mistake on their part, and not something to call Centrelink in a panic about. The other didn't, spends an afternoon on hold trying to find out why their payment changed, and ends up more stressed by the not knowing than by the actual change itself. The 10 minutes now is what buys you that certainty later. One more practical note before the checklist. Know where you're actually going to check these figures once they're confirmed, rather than relying on second-hand summaries or old bookmarks. The MyGov app linked to Centrelink, the Express Plus Centrelink app specifically, and the Services Australia phone line are the three places that will have the real current numbers rather than an estimate someone else has published. A quick login the week the new figures are confirmed is worth more than any early prediction, including the ones in this video. So here's the honest checklist. Confirm your actual new pension rate once it's published, rather than assuming it. If you're close to the thresholds, run your numbers against the new deeming rates before the date arrives, not after. If you were close but missed out on the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card before, check again once the new figures land. Write down where you stand today, so you've got something to compare against once the date hits. And check the real numbers directly through MyGov or the Express Plus app, rather than an estimate, once they're confirmed. None of this takes long individually. What actually costs people is doing nothing and finding out what changed from a smaller pension payment instead of from checking ahead of time. Two honest notes before you go. First, all figures here are based on the most recently published data and early indicators. Always confirm the final numbers directly with Services Australia once they're released. Second, this is general information, not personal advice. How these changes affect your own payment depends on your specific circumstances, so confirm your own situation with Services Australia or a licensed financial advisor. If you've already checked your own numbers, tell me in the comments what you found. It helps me know what to cover next. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.